All right, strap yourselves in, because today we are going deep on one of philosophy's most infamous provocateurs,
Yeah.
Friedrich Nietzsche,
Yep.
and his masterpiece, Beyond Good and Evil.
Oh, yeah.
We've got excerpts straight from the source,
Wow.
so no filter,
Uh-huh.
just pure Nietzschean energy.
Pure Nietzschean energy.
The goal today is to unpack some of his most explosive ideas
Okay.
and see if we can't excavate a few gems of wisdom that might just well resonate with you.
Resonate.
You know, Nietzsche really had it out for what he called dogmatic philosophy.
Dogmatic philosophy.
And honestly, I've always been kind of curious,
Okay.
but what exactly rubbed him the wrong way?
Yeah.
Let's deal with that.
So it's like this. He saw these dogmatic philosophies, these systems, claiming a monopoly on truth as gilded cages for the mind. Like gilded cages. Take Plato's ideas, for example. His pure spirit and the good in itself, these grand, eternal concepts, they exist outside our messy, everyday reality. And that's where Nietzsche saw the problem.
So wanting to reach for the good, that seems pretty notable on the surface. Where does it go wrong?
Nietzsche argued that these systems, in their quest for absolute truth, actually end up flipping truth on its head. They deny life's core principle, constant change, a constant becoming. Imagine trying to force the wild, untamed river of existence into a neat, predictable canal.
Right.
That's what these rigid systems attempt to do.
So clinging to these absolute truths, like pure spirit or the good of, it's almost like trying to avoid the real deal, the chaotic beauty of it all.
Exactly. It's a way of shrinking back from the raw, untamed energy of life itself.
Okay, now let's talk about something that really blew my mind when I first encountered Nietzsche, the will to power. He's suggesting that even our most selfless acts are secretly fueled by a desire for power. It felt almost cynical at first.
Yeah, it's definitely a concept that can make you squirm a little. But consider this. Picture an artist pouring their soul into a painting.
Okay.
Or an entrepreneur launching a bold new venture. Nietzsche would say, even in those seemingly selfless acts of creation, there's this will to power at play. This burning desire to leave your mark on the world. It's about expansion. It's about pushing boundaries, not just about lording over others.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing then, this will to power. It's more like a fundamental force of nature, like gravity,
So?
but for our motivations.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that this force is within all of us, driving us to create, to overcome, to become something more. Nietzsche wasn't trying to hand us a new set of moral commandments. He wanted us to see through the illusions of the old ones.
And he definitely wasn't afraid to call it as he saw it. There's this passage where he talked about how deeply these moral prejudices have infected even the most intellectual minds. It's like he's saying none of us are immune to these hidden biases.
That's a key insight. Nietzsche believed that what we call morality is often just a reflection of our cultural programming, the values of the herd, so to speak.
Which brings us to Nietzsche's champion, the free spirit. Who is this mysterious figure who stands apart from the crowd?
The free spirit is someone who dares to question everything, all the givens and shoulds that society throws at us. They're explorers, charting their own course through life. Imagine someone who throws out the rule book and creates their own values, based on a deep and honest self-understanding.
There's a quote that captures this perfectly. It's about how philosophers should beware of martyrdom in their pursuit of knowledge. It's like he's saying, hey, searching for truth can be dangerous, so brace yourselves.
It highlights the potential risks and rewards that come with genuine knowledge. True knowledge can be liberating, but it can also set you apart. It can challenge your most deeply held beliefs and put you at odds with the world around you.
And that tension leads us right to the heart of the book's title. Beyond Good and Evil. What does it mean to venture beyond that age-old divide?
It's about realizing that good and evil aren't fixed universal categories. They're fluid, shifting concepts, often molded to suit those in power.
So instead of just accepting these pre-packaged notions of good and evil, Nietzsche wanted us to question their origins, to trace them back to their roots.
Precisely. And to explore the possibility of crafting our own values. Values that align with our individual nature and aspirations.
There's a line that really embodies this spirit of self-reliance. It's about how independence is the privilege of the strong, that those who attempt it without being forced prove their strength and daring.
That line underscores the courage it takes to truly be independent. To break free from the herd mentality and carve your own path requires immense inner strength and a willingness to face the unknown. Not everyone is cut out for that kind of journey. Not everyone. It's like Nietzsche saying true freedom isn't something that's given to you. It's something you seize for yourself.
And Nietzsche had some pretty strong opinions about master and slave morality. What's the essence of this distinction?
It's one of his most provocative ideas, for sure. He argued that master morality springs from the powerful, the noble, those who are self-assured. Think strength, pride, achievement. Those are their hallmarks.
Right.
Slave morality, on the other hand, arises from the oppressed, the weak, the resentful. Compassion, humility, selflessness, these are their values. But Nietzsche saw a real danger in slave morality gaining too much influence. He felt it could stifle greatness, leading to a kind of leveling down of society, a world where everyone is reduced to the lowest common denominator.
There's that striking line where Nietzsche says that when slave morality takes over, language itself starts to equate good with stupid. It's like he's saying that under this system, even language becomes a tool for keeping the strong and independent down.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? Nietzsche believed that language isn't neutral. It carries the values of the culture that created it.
Right.
And in a culture dominated by slave morality, the very words we use to describe the world can reinforce a sense of powerlessness and conformity.
So if language itself is biased, how can we even begin to think outside of this good and evil box? Where do we even start?
That's where Nietzsche's radical skepticism comes in. He wants us to question not just our moral beliefs, but also the very foundation of our knowledge. He was famously skeptical of the idea of absolute truth.
Right.
If we can't even trust our senses and our own minds, what can we rely on?
He was really pushing us to confront the limits of our understanding, wasn't he?
Absolutely. Nietzsche argued that what we call truth is often just a story we tell ourselves, a narrative that helps us make sense of the world. This narrative is shaped by our instincts, our desires, our upbringing, all sorts of things.
There's that passage where he writes, one thinks, but that this one is precisely the famous old ego is, to put it mildly, only a supposition, an assertion, and assuredly not an immediate certainty. He's even challenging the idea of a stable, unified self. It's kind of mind-bending when you think about it.
He's pulling the rug out from under our most basic assumptions. Nietzsche believed that the self isn't some fixed entity, but a constantly evolving process. It's a whirlwind of drives, instincts, and experiences, all interacting and changing in a never-ending dance. So if even the self is in flux, how can we ever hope to grasp some fixed objective truth?
I can see how that line of thinking might make some people uncomfortable. It's like he's saying, hey, there's no easy answers here. You've got to do the work. You've got to question everything.
That's the challenge Nietzsche throws down to us. He's not saying that truth doesn't exist, but rather that it's far more elusive and complex than we tend to think. It's something we have to continually strive for, to wrestle with, to create through our own interpretations of the world.
So it's not about giving up on the search for truth, but about approaching that search with a healthy dose of skepticism and humility, like a scientist constantly testing their hypotheses.
That's a great analogy. Nietzsche was deeply suspicious of anyone who claimed to have all the answers, to have found the one true path to enlightenment. He believed that kind of certainty was a form of intellectual laziness, a way of avoiding the hard work of thinking for oneself.
You know, this reminds me of Nietzsche's concerns about religion. He saw the potential for religion to become too dominant in society. It's like he was worried that religions could become ends in themselves, rather than tools for self-discovery and growth. What are your thoughts on that?
He definitely saw religion as a double-edged sword. On the one hand, he recognized that it could be a powerful force for bringing people together, for giving meaning and purpose to life, even for instilling a sense of awe and wonder in the face of the universe. But he was also keenly aware of the dangers of religious dogma, of blind faith, and of the way religion could be used to stifle individual freedom and critical thinking.
It seems like he was particularly concerned with the influence of Christianity on European culture. What was it about Christianity that rubbed him the wrong way?
Nietzsche saw Christianity as a prime example of slave morality on a grand scale, a system that he felt elevated weakness, humility, and self-denial, above strength, pride, and self-assertion. He believed that in many ways, Christianity had poisoned the wellsprings of European culture, leading to a decline in vitality, creativity, and what he called the will to power.
His language about Christianity is pretty strong. He talks about it creating a sublime abortion of man.
Mm.
and leading to a dwarfed, almost ludicrous species in Europe. He didn't hold back, that's for sure.
He was definitely a master of provocation, but it's important to remember the context. Nietzsche was writing in a specific time and place, reacting to what he saw as the suffocating grip of Christian morality on 19th century Europe.
Right.
He felt Christianity had become too cozy, too complacent, too focused on the afterlife at the expense of this life.
So it wasn't necessarily that he was rejecting all forms of spirituality or religious experience. He was more concerned with the ways organized religion could be used to control and manipulate people.
Exactly. He was fiercely passionate about individual freedom and self-creation. He believed each person has the potential to become a kind of Superman, to transcend conventional morality and create their own values.
Right.
But he feared that the dominance of Christian morality in Europe was preventing people from reaching that potential.
That idea of the Superman is so fascinating and a bit terrifying, too. What did Nietzsche really mean by this concept? Was he talking about some kind of superhuman being with extraordinary powers?
The Superman, or Overman as it's sometimes translated, is probably Nietzsche's most misunderstood idea. It's not about physical strength or political power, but about a state of spiritual and intellectual transcendence. The Superman is the individual who has broken free from the shackles of conventional morality, who embraces the fullness of life with all its joys and sorrows, and who creates their own values based on a profound understanding of themselves and the world.
So it's about pushing beyond the limits of what we think is possible for ourselves, about constantly striving for growth and self-overcoming, like a kind of evolution of consciousness.
That's a great way to put it. The Superman isn't a destination, but an ongoing journey of self-discovery and self-creation. It's about harnessing the will to power, not as a desire to dominate others, but as a creative force that drives us to become the best versions of ourselves.
This is where things get really interesting for me. Nietzsche seemed to be asking whether modern society, with its focus on conformity and egalitarianism, could actually cultivate such individuals. Did he believe that modern society was making it harder to achieve this kind of self-transcendence?
That's a question that runs through a lot of Nietzsche's work. He saw the rise of democracy and socialism in Europe as a potential threat to the emergence of the Superman. He worried that these movements, while well-intentioned, could lead to a leveling down of society, a suppression of individuality and excellence in the pursuit of equality and security for all.
It's almost like he's saying that too much comfort and security can soften us, that we need a certain degree of struggle and even suffering to push us to our limits and help us reach our full potential. Is that what he's getting at?
It's a challenging idea, no doubt about it, but it's at the core of Nietzsche's philosophy. He believed that an overemphasis on happiness and well-being could actually be harmful to human growth and flourishing. He argued that we need a certain amount of what he called Dionysian energy in our lives, a kind of wild, chaotic, creative energy that often expresses itself through struggle, suffering, and even destruction.
And this ties back to his critique of Christianity, doesn't it? He saw Christianity as being too focused on the Apollonian, on order, reason, and control, at the expense of the Dionysian. It's like he's saying we need a balance of both to truly thrive.
Exactly. Nietzsche believed that a healthy, vibrant culture needs a balance of both Apollonian and Dionysian energies. Too much Apollonian control can lead to stagnation and repression, while too much Dionysian chaos can lead to nihilism and self-destruction. It's about finding that sweet spot between order and chaos.
So where does that leave us? If Nietzsche's right and modern society is nudging us towards a kind of bland, comfortable mediocrity, is there any hope for this Superman to emerge?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Nietzsche doesn't give us a roadmap or a set of instructions. Instead, he throws down a challenge. He asks us to grapple with this question honestly and to consider that maybe, just maybe, the path to greatness doesn't lie in conforming to society's expectations. Maybe it's about forging our own path, even if that means embracing a certain degree of risk, struggle, even solitude.
There's something exhilarating about that. Isn't there this idea that true fulfillment comes from carving your own path?
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is that while Nietzsche was a harsh critic of his time, he also held out a glimmer of hope for the future. He believed the very forces driving what he saw as the degeneration of European culture, the rise of democracy, science, and secularism, could also contain the seeds of something new, a more vibrant, more creative society. But this new society would require a radical reevaluation of values, a rejection of the old life-denying morality in favor of a new ethic that embraces the fullness of human potential.
That sounds like a pretty massive undertaking, reevaluating all of Western morality. Where do we even begin?
It's a daunting task, no question. But for Nietzsche, it was essential. He believed humanity was at a crossroads. We could continue down the path of what he called degeneration towards a bland, comfortable existence, or we could embrace the challenge of self-overcoming and strive to become something more than we ever thought possible.
So it's not about finding some new set of rules to follow, but about a fundamental shift in how we exist in the world.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's about moving beyond the old categories of good and evil, master and slave, and creating a new way of living that is grounded in a deep understanding of ourselves, our potential, and the creative forces that drive us.
Nietzsche seems to be calling for a radical kind of self-awareness, this willingness to look unflinchingly at our own motivations and desires, even the ones we might not be proud of.
You're absolutely right. Nietzsche believed that the first step towards self-overcoming is self-knowledge. We need to understand our strengths and weaknesses, our passions and prejudices, our hopes and fears. Only then can we begin to break free from the chains of conventional morality and create a life that is truly our own.
That reminds me of that passage where Nietzsche talks about the free spirit needing to subject oneself to one's own tests to see if they're truly cut out for independence and command. That's like he's saying the path to freedom is not for the faint of heart. It demands courage and even certain ruthlessness with ourselves.
Exactly. Nietzsche wasn't about easy answers or feel-good platitudes. He believed that the pursuit of truth and self-discovery is a difficult, sometimes even dangerous journey. It requires us to confront our own limitations, to question our most cherished beliefs, and to be willing to stand alone if necessary.
And there's a certain beauty in that, isn't there, in embracing the challenge of becoming who we truly are, even if it means facing some uncomfortable truths about ourselves along the way.
There's a profound beauty in that Nietzsche's philosophy, though challenging and often unsettling, ultimately presents a vision of human existence that is both empowering and inspiring. It's a vision that urges us to embrace our full potential, to live with passion and creativity, and to create a world worthy of our highest aspirations.
So what does all this mean for us in our everyday lives?
Right.
How do we take these abstract ideas and apply them to the real world?
That's a question each of us has to wrestle with on our own. Nietzsche's philosophy isn't a set of rules or guidelines. It's a framework for thinking about the world and our place in it. It's an invitation to question everything, to challenge our assumptions, and to create our own values based on a deep understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is Nietzsche's emphasis on questioning our moral assumptions. It's so easy to take our values for granted, but he reminds us that these values aren't fixed or absolute. They are products of history, culture, and power.
And once we realize that we can start making more conscious choices about the values we choose to embrace, we can become the authors of our own moral code rather than simply inheriting one from the past.
That's a powerful thought, isn't it? To realize that we have the power to shape our own moral universe, to define what is good and what is evil for ourselves.
It is empowering, but it's also a huge responsibility. Nietzsche believed that with freedom comes responsibility. If we are going to create our own values, we have to be willing to live with the consequences of those choices.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground today, from Nietzsche's critique of dogmatic philosophy to his vision of the Superman. It's been a wild ride.
It has been a fascinating journey. Nietzsche's ideas are complex, often contradictory, and always thought-provoking. Engaging with them can be a powerful way to examine our own beliefs and assumptions, and maybe even to catch a glimpse of what lies beyond good and evil.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this intellectual adventure. And if you're feeling brave, be sure to check out Nietzsche's work for yourself. You might be surprised by what you discover.